So it's not taking care of their work every day, and a lot of their power is just being present. Because there are so few people participating in the democratic process, the few that are become a lot more powerful. And those folks are depended upon to provide information. Elected officials are given thousands, literally thousands of bills to read in a legislative session or a congressional session, and there is no way that in addition to trying to do a budget and making appearances and going to all their meetings, that they ever have time to read every single word of all of those bills. Plus, they're written in this legalese that is very often difficult to understand. So very often elected officials are dependent on their constituents and the lobbyists that very often represent their constituents to let them know what the potential implications of this legislation will be. So that's really, in addition to the whole suitcases full of money, stereotype, is why lobbyists are very often effective. Additionally, many lobbyists come from the political sector. They already have those relationships, so it's a great career for a former, state legislator or, city councilman or whatever to go into lobbying afterwards because there's already that relationship in place. So you haven't been an elected official. Well, a couple of you have, but most of you have not been elected officials in the past, and you don't have time to be there every single day, all day, paying attention. You have to go to work, so how can you be influential? Well, the very first thing you want to do is make sure that you have a relationship with an elected official before you're going there with your hand out. And in fact, if the best way, well, is to, again, get to know that person as soon as you can. So as soon as they get elected, or better yet, before they get elected. How many people have ever been to a political fundraiser? And how many people have ever worked on someone's campaign? Okay. Well, they're going to remember you if you work on their campaign, I guarantee you. If you're walking a neighborhood with somebody, if you have a candidate that you believe in, you need to really be working on getting that person elected, because it's almost lost if you wait until they get elected. You want to get people to run for office that are already inclined to support your issue, or better yet, run yourself, because that's where the most power is going to be. And the sooner we all realize how much power we have, the more the world is going to look the way we want it to look. Another tip I have in sort of the area of building relationships is, if you're representing, for example, a nonprofit organization or even an issue like the arts, you want to make sure that you're sharing good deeds and good news with an elected official. So celebrate. If your organization gets an award, or you're doing a great performance, or you're having a great opening, you want to send that press clipping or that invitation to your elected official and let them know. Give them something to have pride about within their own community, because very often all they're getting is complaints. And what you want to do is make deposits of good needs and good deeds and news, because you don't ever know when something negative is going to come up. And very often it's the thing that you're watching the least is the thing that comes up. And the example that I'll kind of give you of that is that I actually moved here at the end of January from Arizona. And there was a memorial, a beautiful, beautiful memorial that was done for 9/11. But there were some words on the memorial that a few political bloggers got a hold of, some quotes that they didn't like. And that became a campaign issue for a gubernatorial candidate who was a weak candidate and needed a platform to stand on at the last minute. And so the public reaction to that was so strong and very emotional, deservedly so. But had the public or the other elected officials known more about that memorial while it was being created, after it was built even, had that been out there ahead of time, I think it would have diffused a lot of things, because the people that may have had some problems with some of the quotes would have known that, for example, you know, the people that were actually sitting on that commission were bipartisan. They were were appointed by 2 different governors, and had lost people in 9/11 themselves. So I think that kind of education ahead of time can very often diffuse an issue that otherwise could become very volatile. So we want to make sure that we're educating people and celebrating as much as possible ahead of time. Fundraising isn't the only important thing. We also want to make sure that we're giving elected officials the opportunity to meet constituents in their community. It's really important that they make those connections with community leaders and with audiences that they wouldn't otherwise recognize or meet. This is a photograph from an event in Champaign that we did recently with a couple of elected officials, purely to celebrate and thank them for their current support of the arts and to meet the arts community within their district. They got to see an art show at Parkland College, a student art show. They got to hear vignettes of Spoon River anthology being performed by community members, and they had a really nice experience. And now when Ra, who's our executive director, Ra Joy, and I go and call those folks, they're going to remember us. And they're more likely to return our phone call or respond to our email. And that's what it's all about. Again, as I mentioned, be a useful and reliable resource. The Illinois Arts Alliance, of course, knows the value of the arts for art's sake and what it does for us as human beings. But we also need to have hard numbers to give elected officials to give them cover and to defend their arguments. So for example, a couple of years ago, anecdotally, we had all known that arts education was declining in our schools, but we did a study where we surveyed 1,000 school principals and superintendents about what arts education programs they had in their schools, and found that 20% of Illinois school students receive no arts education whatsoever. And that declines as they move through the system. So 1/3 of elementary schools kids don't get any arts education, half of middle school kids don't get any, and 2/3 of high school kids don't get any. The fact that we had that study and we were able to have that as a piece of news to raise awareness around the issue and have hard numbers by a reputable firm that collected the data to back us up helped us to get planning grant program going through the State Board of Education, so that arts education and foreign language programs could be planned through a planning process with money going directly to school districts to make that happen. So that research and having those hard numbers is extremely important, and we want to make sure that we don't forget in the context of things the importance of having those. And in a lot of campaigns you hear a campaign candidate talking about their opponent, and they won't use their opponent's name. They'll say, my opponent feels whatever, and that's because they don't want to put that person's name out there more. So even though they're talking about them negatively, they're not going to help publicize that person by putting their name out there more. We don't want to publicize elected officials who are doing things that we don't like. We want to celebrate people that are doing things well. In Arizona, we had a Legislative All-Stars program where we gave awards to elected officials who had really not just supported the arts, but had really stuck their necks out to create legislation and funding opportunities and gotten them successfully passed.